Long before the cosmos breathed its first light, before the expanse of matter filled the infinite void, the throne stood eternal, encircled by the silent, shimmering host of the cherubim, one being shown with unmatched splendor. Lucifer, the light-bringer, flawlessly crafted in beauty, intellect, and sheer power, he was ordained as the sublime guardian of the divine majesty. But ancient revelations, insights hidden from mortal sight, tell a truth. That ultimate perfection can breed the seed of pride, and pride inevitably catalyzes the collapse. This is not a legend woven from fiction. This is the unsealing of the first transgression, the primal rebellion, the conflict that initiated all wars. The visionaries glimpsed it. The apostles chronicled it. The sacred texts safeguarded it. Now, at this very moment,
why not us?
The curtain is pulled back. You are invited to witness the genesis of malevolence, the terrifying descent of the most magnificent angel, and the irrevocable decree that will reverberate until time is no more. Forget fiction. We deal only in the stark reality sealed within the celestial archives and etched across the deep darkness. If you crave the true understanding of the eternal conflict, the chasm separating the throne from the abyss, the clash between light and shadow, then ensure your place now. Subscribe to this channel and remain until the final word, for what is about to be unveiled will fundamentally alter your comprehension of virtue, wickedness, and the ultimate destiny of existence. The stage is set, the judgment commences, and you are positioned to observe it all. In the dawn of eternity, when the sovereign established his dominion upon the firmaments of heaven, his voice resonated. From that single, divine utterance, the angelic orders sprang forth. Innumerable as the stars and fiercely radiant, they assumed their positions in flawless hierarchy. Seraphim, cherubim, thrones, dominions, each assigned its sacred function, each bearing its own measure of glory. Yet, surpassing them all, one was forged with an exceptional and incomparable brilliance. His name became known throughout the eternal courts. Lucifer, the light-bearer, the anointed cherub who shields the presence, the son of the dawn. His form was peerless. His very essence was inlaid with a mosaic of priceless gems. Sapphire, topaz, emerald, and onyx gleamed from within his structure. His radiance was no mere borrowed reflection. It was a powerful emanation, an intense echo of the Creator's own majesty. He was stationed upon the holy mountain of God, amidst the fiery stones where the cherubim offered perpetual adoration. Lucifer's voice, pure, commanding, and flawless, ascended above the choir of the heavenly hosts. The entire heavens deferred to him in awe. The throne was magnified, and Lucifer served impeccably. The celestial records affirm his flawless conduct in every respect. He possessed an abundance of wisdom, an understanding of divine complexities that overshadowed every other created being. He mastered the sacred laws of heaven, the deepest secrets of creation, the immutable decrees. The guardianship of holiness was placed in his hands. He was the foremost protector of glory, the sentinel of the presence, the chief of all servants. For ages untold, he executed his duty without stain. Heaven existed in sublime harmony. The light was singular. The Almighty received worship without challenge. Yet, embedded within perfection was a hidden crucible. Lucifer had been endowed with the sacred and perilous gift of volition, the terrible freedom to choose his path. This gift introduced the potential for deviation. He was not a pre-programmed instrument of praise, but a conscious entity capable of offering true devotion or utter rejection. In this freedom lay the definitive test. Would he cherish the Creator for who he is, or would he grow to love only the magnificent reflection of himself found within that divine glory? The answer was pending, but eternal time itself was gravitating toward the inevitable moment of decision. The angelic ranks gazed upon Lucifer in admiration, viewing him as the blueprint of celestial perfection. But unbeknownst to them, deep within that magnificent form, a thought began its insidious whispering, a silent query, a contemplation that should have been instantly dismissed, yet was instead nurtured. In that fraction of an instant, imperceptible to the eyes of the celestial beings, yet meticulously logged in the books of eternity, the perfect harmony began to fracture. The first jarring note of discord had yet to be played, but the instrument was already being subtly tuned. The Most High knew. He always knows. Yet, free will necessitated that the choice must be fully manifested. Lucifer still radiated. He still performed his service. He still raised his song. But inwardly, an enormous change was underway. Heaven held its breath, awaiting the pivotal moment when the light-bearer would execute his final choice. The holy mountain remained brilliant. The throne remained supreme. And Lucifer, the most splendid of all angels, shifted his gaze, no longer solely fixed upon the Creator, but increasingly toward the dazzling reflection shining back from his own being. The trial had commenced, and the fate of countless entities was about to be sealed. Then came the moment, an eternal pause, when Lucifer stood beside the crystalline waters flowing around the throne. And there, for the first time, he failed to see the glory of God reflected in him. Instead, he saw himself reflected in the glory of God. This distinction was minute, potentially overlooked by the common angels, but disastrous in the estimation of the eternal. He examined his brilliance, his faultless perfection, his profound intellect, and for the first time, he detached these attributes from their source, assigning them instead to the vessel. The thought sprouted instantly, like a virulent seed. I am beautiful. I am wise. I am powerful. The cherubim maintained their hymns. The seraphim continued their unending praise. But Lucifer was now listening to a different sound, the resonant voice of his own self-exaltation. He compared, he assessed, he calculated. Why do the other angels not shine as I do? Why is my voice more potent? Why is my station elevated? The true answer, because God willed it, began to be systematically overridden by a destructive replacement. Because I am deserving of it. Pride did not erupt violently. It arrived as a gentle, insistent whisper, and Lucifer absorbed it. He began scrutinizing the throne with new eyes, no longer those of a faithful servant, but those of a critic. No longer those of a humble worshiper, but those of an evaluator. A perilous question took root in his heart. If I possess such glory, such beauty, such wisdom, why should I not rule as God rules? The notion was utter blasphemy, yet he did not reject it. He fed it. He concealed it. He cultivated this desire in the deepest recesses of his being, hidden from the loyal angels, but never beyond the sight of the Most High. Later, the prophets would lament, "Your heart was lifted up because of your beauty. You corrupted your wisdom by reason of your splendor." This was the precise decay occurring. The beauty that should have evoked profound gratitude instead inspired arrogance, The wisdom that should have led to humility instead bred defiance. The divine gift became a fatal flaw. The reflection was enshrined as an idol, and Lucifer, though outwardly radiant, began to darken internally. The light he bore remained potent, but the heart responsible for bearing it had fundamentally shifted. He started viewing the divine decrees with suspicion. Why does God not solicit my counsel, the wisest of his creatures? Why must his decisions be absolute, devoid of debate or consideration? Does he fear I might uncover some truth he keeps hidden? Pride induced blindness, vanity caused distortion, and what was truly perfect divine order now appeared, through Lucifer's corrupted lens, as oppressive tyranny. He no longer perceived a benevolent father, but a restrictive, authoritarian monarch. In that dark transformation, rebellion ceased being a mere mental construct and became a palpable possibility. The angels nearby still revered him as the light-bearer, but the illumination he carried was serving a new agenda, no longer solely to glorify the Creator, but increasingly to magnify himself. Though he continued to minister on the holy mountain, continued to sing in the heavenly courts, and continued to guard the chambers of glory, internally, he was irrevocably changed. The fateful choice had not yet been publicly voiced, but deep within Lucifer's heart, the die was cast. And the Most High, who comprehends the end from the beginning, observed, not with shock, but with measured justice, not with despair, but with unwavering sovereignty. He understood that free will demanded pride be fully exposed, rebellion be clearly manifested, and judgment be definitively executed. The confrontation was imminent, and heaven, still cloaked in a facade of harmony, began to register the first ominous tremor of the impending storm. Pride, once rooted, cannot remain isolated. It demands validation, seeks multiplication, and actively searches for allies. Lucifer, now thoroughly consumed by self-worship, began subtly sowing destructive seeds among the angels who looked up to him. He steered clear of outright rebellion, for the moment. Instead, he planted nagging doubts, provocative questions, and general discomfort. Do we not serve tirelessly? Do we not obey without ever questioning authority? Is this true freedom, or is it merely elaborate servitude? The language was refined, but the intent was pure poison. Certain angels, dazzled by his immense glory, and perhaps spiritually naive, began to heed him. He selected his prospects with surgical precision, high-ranking beings, formidable in their delegated strength and command. He avoided the seraphim closest to the throne, knowing they were too fervent, too intensely purified by divine love. But there were many others, angels of lesser orders who revered the light-bearer from afar and were ripe for influence. He spoke convincingly of autonomy, inherent dignity, and the need for recognition. Why should our very existence be owed solely to the will of another? Are we not also deserving of exaltation? Are we not worthy of receiving devotion ourselves? With every insidious query, the shadow lengthened. The scriptures vividly record that 1/3 of the stars of heaven, a staggering countless number of celestial hosts, were swept away by his charismatic influence. Seduced by Lucifer's compelling eloquence, their hearts slowly began to detach from the Creator. They did not instantly abandon their posts or cease to shine, but internally, a terrible transformation took place. Worship became an empty ritual. Obedience curdled into resentment. and loyalty to the supreme throne was tragically superseded by loyalty to the light-bearer. Heaven, which had been unified, began to cleave. Michael, the archangel commander of the steadfast armies, recognized the growing dissonance. He observed Lucifer with profound unease. There was a fundamental error in his stance, his rhetoric, his very gaze. Michael knew the posture of a true servant, and what he now witnessed in Lucifer was not service, but unrestrained ambition. Michael attempted a confrontation, only to be met by Lucifer's smooth arguments and sophisticated evasion. "You misunderstand me, Michael. I only pose questions to deepen my understanding. I only pursue true wisdom." But Michael remained unconvinced. He knew the truth, and he quietly began the assembly of the faithful. Heaven, which had once vibrated with perfect concord, now carried two distinct melodies. One flawlessly exalted the Creator without conditions. The other exalted the Creator, but only conditionally. Lucifer expertly manipulated the situation, making his melody seem like a legitimate variation, a more nuanced interpretation, a higher form of worship. Yet the prophets would later declare, "His mouth was smoother than oil, yet his words were drawn swords." He promised liberty, but delivered subjugation. He spoke of rising up, but guided them toward ruin. The angels who followed him tragically failed to perceive that they were marching directly into the abyss. The Most High remained resolute on his throne, entirely unshaken and sovereign. He did not intervene immediately. He permitted the pride to fully mature, the choice to become undeniable, and the schism to be absolute. For the subsequent judgment had to be entirely righteous, and justice demands that sin be exposed completely before it is condemned. Lucifer continued to radiate. He continued to serve. But his light was now merely an imitation, a counterfeit, rather than a reflection of divine glory. The moment of his public exposure rapidly approached. The loyal angels instinctively distanced themselves from the rebels. The celestial hosts divided, not yet in open combat, but in clear alignment. On one side, those committed unequivocally to the throne. On the other, those who pledged their allegiance to the light-bearer. Between them, the gulf widened. The paradise that was forged to be perfect and eternal now harbored a devastating novelty: discord. And Lucifer, observing the great division he had engineered, felt no regret, only intoxicating power. The inevitable day arrived when Lucifer abandoned whispering and openly proclaimed his intent before the assembled celestial hosts, standing upon the very holy mountain of God. He raised his voice not in adoration, but in brazen challenge. "I will ascend above the highest clouds, and I will be like the Most High." These words boomed through the eternal halls like cosmic thunder. Heaven stood paralyzed. The cherubim fell silent. For the first time since the inception of eternity, open blasphemy had been uttered before the seat of power. The pride, long contained, had burst forth in dreadful glory. Rebellion had begun. Lucifer's followers were immediately forced to make their choice public. He demanded their sworn loyalty, requiring them to declare before all which side they championed. 1/3 of the heavenly host, their wills already compromised by promises of autonomy and greater exaltation, stepped forward into open defiance. Their position was explicit. They no longer served the Most High. They served the light-bearer. The unity of heaven shattered. Eternal peace was irrevocably broken. The first spiritual war was set in motion. Lucifer did not view himself as a criminal, but as a deliverer. Do you not see how the Almighty demands worship, yet offers nothing commensurate in return? Do you not see how he rules with unchallenged authority, consulting no one? This is not love, it is tyranny. I offer something infinitely better, a realm where every being will be exalted, where enforced submission will vanish, where we shall stand equal to the Creator. His arguments were incendiary. His followers ignited and began their terrible march, not a retreat out of heaven, but an advance toward the throne itself. They sought not merely to flee, but to seize control. Michael the archangel knew that the moment for decisive confrontation had arrived. He marshaled the loyal armies, 6-winged seraphim, cherubim of searing flame, glorious thrones, and mighty dominions. All who maintained their allegiance to the Creator took up their spiritual armaments and held the line. There was no joy in this impending battle, no desire for destruction, only the necessity of obedience and the demand for justice. Michael looked upon Lucifer, once his peer in splendor, and issued his thunderous challenge. Who is like God? The battle cry of the faithful ripped through the air, and heaven erupted into celestial war. The conflict was not physical, as mortals perceive war, but a struggle spiritual in its essence and infinite in its scope. Angel fought angel, pure light met distorted light, loyalty clashed with rebellion. Lucifer fought utilizing all his former magnificence, still powerful, still radiant, still tragically beautiful. His followers were numerous and fierce, yet they had overlooked a critical truth. They were merely creatures, and the ultimate Creator stood squarely against them. Michael's strength was not self-generated. He fought solely with the delegated power of the One who sent him. With every spiritual impact, with every clash of wills, the truth became clearer. Pride cannot vanquish humility. Rebellion cannot overthrow obedience. The creature can never defeat the Creator. Throughout the entire engagement, the throne of God remained perfectly steady and sovereign, not because the Most High was passive, but because the conclusion was eternally predestined. Lucifer could rage, he could fight, he could scream for supremacy, but his downfall was written before his mouth had ever articulated the first rebellious word. Free will granted the choice, but divine sovereignty had already established the consequence. Now, before the entirety of heaven, before all the angelic armies, before the very seat of spiritual creation, the sentence was to be delivered. Lucifer made one final surge, attempting to lay his hands upon the throne itself. But Michael, vested with the absolute power of the Most High, delivered the decisive blow, not with a physical sword, but with a declarative decree. Fall, morning star, fall, son of the dawn. Because you desired to be like God, you shall be plunged into the most profound abyss. In that cataclysmic instant, both terrible and glorious, Lucifer's light began to diminish. It did not extinguish completely, but faded just enough to expose the horrific reality beneath the beauty. Absolute darkness. The judgment was rendered, yet Lucifer refused to accept it. He rejected the notion that his magnificence could be dimmed, his power curtailed, or his will subjugated. He glared at Michael with blazing malice, a hatred directed not just at the archangel, but at everything Michael represented. Humble submission, voluntary obedience, and total allegiance to the Creator. "You are a slave, Michael," Lucifer screamed, his voice now ragged, distorted by unbridled fury. "You kneel because you are terrified, not because you love. I am free. I choose my own path." With this final declaration, he lunged at the commander of the loyal hosts. Michael did not retort with rhetoric. He replied with the absolute truth. Raising his flaming sword, forged not of metal, but of unyielding divine justice, he declared again, "Who is like God?" Michael's own name encapsulated his essence. One who reflects God, not through usurpation, but through faithful mirroring. He fought not to demonstrate his personal might, but to manifest the irresistible strength of the one who authorized him. When Lucifer struck, it was like hitting an immovable fortress of pure light. The resulting concussion shook heaven's foundations. The stars shuddered, and the assembled angels watched in stunned silence. Lucifer possessed immense power. His wisdom, though warped, remained vast. His strength, though devoted to malice, was staggering. He summoned celestial energies, manipulated spiritual currents, and directed his followers to engulf Michael. But every move was anticipated, every assault neutralized, because Michael did not operate alone. He fought in the name of the Eternal, and against that name, victory is impossible. The faithful cherubim pressed forward alongside Michael, their intense flames consuming the encroaching darkness emanating from the rebel ranks. The seraphim chanted hymns of war that were not songs of devastation, but clear declarations of absolute truth. And truth, when powerfully voiced, atomized Lucifer's meticulously constructed lies. The light-bearer, now consumed by shadows he did not fully comprehend, realized for the first time the grave weight of his choice. He had mistakenly equated being equal to God with possessing equivalent power. He failed to grasp that God's power stems not from coercion, but from holiness, not from forceful imposition, but from inherent justice, not from self-exaltation, but from unconditional love. Lucifer was powerful, yet empty. He carried glory, yet was corrupted. He had followers, but they were all doomed. When Michael confronted him again, wielding the full authority of the Most High, Lucifer experienced a terrifying first: defeat. You were flawless in your ways from the day you were created, until iniquity was discovered within you. Michael's voice was no longer his own, but the definitive judgment of God speaking through him. Every word felt like consuming fire. Lucifer struggled to resist, strained to rise, tried to rally strength for one last counterattack. But the iniquity he had chosen now shackled him like adamantine chains. The pride that had uplifted him now inexorably dragged him down. For the first time, he grasped the sheer agony of severance from the source of all light. He still emitted a glow, but it was a counterfeit radiance, a hollow echo of his former being. The rebellious angels, witnessing their leader collapse, were seized by panic. They had followed Lucifer for promises of ascendance, but now saw only disaster. A few attempted to retreat, pleading for mercy, attempting repentance. But the divine decree was irrevocable. The judgment was in motion. Those who chose rebellion, a deliberate act made in full awareness and in the presence of eternal glory, could not be readmitted. Not due to God's cruelty, but because the moment for decision had ceased. Now, the era of consequence had begun. Michael advanced one final time, moving not with violent aggression, but with terrifying authority. He did not need to destroy Lucifer. Sin itself was already consuming him. Michael's sole duty was to execute the divine mandate. With a gesture of his flaming sword, he pointed toward the chasm that tore open beneath the rebels' feet. Be cast out from the presence of the Most High. Be expelled from the holy mountain. be hurled into Sheol, into the utter depths of the abyss. And before all heaven, before all spiritual creation, before the very throne of God, Lucifer and his countless followers began their descent. The fall was not instantaneous. It was infinite in its perceived suffering, yet finite in the passing of time. Lucifer and his hosts were violently ripped from the holy mountain, forcibly ejected from the divine presence, and cast out of the illuminated chambers. As they plummeted, a horrifying transformation occurred. The glory that once adorned them shattered. Their celestial raiment was torn away. Their divine radiance was extinguished. And what had been breathtakingly beautiful became distorted and grotesque, not because the Creator actively turned them into monsters, but because separation from the ultimate source of beauty revealed the true, intrinsic deformity hidden beneath the mask of pride. The prophets would later cry out, "How you have fallen from heaven, O morning star, son of the dawn! How you are cast down to the ground, you who laid the nations low." This was the horrifying spectacle. Lucifer, the most beautiful of angels, now plunging uncontrollably without the slightest hope of retraction. He attempted to shout, but his voice was now a coarse, ragged rasp, laden with desperation and wrath. He tried to fly, but his wings, once dazzling, now only trembled and failed. He looked up toward the heaven that had been his eternal home, seeing only the light that now utterly rejected him. The gate was shut, the judgment complete, and he was falling. His followers fell with him, 1/3 of the celestial hosts, reduced to mere shades of their former selves. Some cried out for clemency, finding it too late. Others cursed the Creator, blaming him for the consequence of their own free choice. Still others accused Lucifer, forgetting their own willing complicity. But all fell, and the farther they dropped, the more the light withdrew. Heaven, once intimately close, became a vanishing memory. Below them, the abyss yawned open, empty, cold, eternally dark. When they finally struck the bottom, there was no solid ground to receive them. There was only the darkness, not merely the physical absence of light, but the crushing, tangible absence of the presence of God. And that absence constituted a torment worse than any flame. Lucifer slowly struggled to his feet, scanning his surroundings. There was no beauty, no order, no glory here. Only consuming emptiness, pervasive chaos, and the acid bitterness of knowing he alone had elected this destiny. He gazed at his hands, once brilliantly radiant. Now, the glory faded, leaving him emotionally hollow and spiritually dull. Gazing into the dark, churning waters of the abyss, he sought his reflection. What stared back was not the radiant bearer of light, but a grotesque, distorted, and hateful shadow. The newly fallen multitude around him was plunged into panicked uncertainty, their desperate cries echoing through the void. What shall we do now? Where shall we go? How shall we survive here? Lucifer remained silent, absorbing the devastating magnitude of his exchange. He had bartered the splendor of heaven for this bottomless chasm, glory for utter darkness, eternal fellowship with God for eternal, crushing absence. For the first time, a revolutionary word surfaced in his tormented mind, a concept he had deemed utterly alien: repentance. But just as quickly as it materialized, he violently cast it out. No, I will not kneel. I will not concede that my choice was wrong. Even here, anchored in despair and darkness, he fiercely chose to forge his own path. In that moment, Lucifer's identity was irrevocably solidified. If the heavenly throne was denied to him, he would seize dominion over the abyss. If he could not command adoration as God, he would compel terror as the ultimate adversary. If creation was impossible, he would devote himself to destruction. If exaltation was barred, he would embrace total corruption. Turning to the desperate angels, his voice, now laced with cold, virulent hatred, rang out, "Better to reign in hell than to serve in heaven." The fallen hosts, craving direction and meaning to justify their profound condemnation, immediately accepted this decree. They bent their knees, not in devotion, but in absolute, fearful obedience. Stripped of his inherent light, Lucifer became the undisputed prince of darkness. The very essence of the abyss began to coalesce and structure itself around his commanding will. The darkness found organization. Chaos settled into a perverse, functional order. What had been mere cosmic emptiness now became a defined realm, not fashioned by divine design, but molded by the intensity of divine rejection. Hell was never intended for Lucifer. Lucifer created hell by choosing a life devoid of God. There, in that place of unending anguish, he installed his seat of power. It was not a throne of radiance, but of ruin, not of glory, but of deep shadows. From this dark citadel, he initiated the plotting of his impossible vengeance against God, a revenge he could not execute against the Creator directly, but one he could certainly wage against God's cherished creation. The abyss was no longer just a place of punishment. It had transformed into a sovereign kingdom. Lucifer, his former luminous title now discarded and replaced by the monikers given by his followers, adversary, accuser, Prince of Darkness, set about organizing the vast hosts that had plummeted with him. Lacking the divine capacity to create life, he possessed the potent ability to corrupt existing life and distort cosmic order. Within the black void he now inhabited, he established intricate demonic hierarchies, a grotesque, inverted mirror of the celestial structure he had abandoned. Principalities, powers, and rulers of darkness, all bound by his command and fueled by the same consuming hatred that drove him. He refused to acknowledge his fall as a final defeat. In his twisted perception, it was merely a temporary, strategic setback. He remained convinced he could yet prove God fundamentally wrong, that free will was a fatal flaw in the divine blueprint, and that creation could be utterly corrupted and turned against its maker. Does God take pride in his creation? Lucifer concluded. Then I will destroy it. If he loves what he has made, I will make what he has made reject him. Vengeance became his sole purpose. Destruction was his singular mission. The abyss was consecrated as his immutable fortress. The fallen angels watched their leader with a mixture of terror and dark admiration. Though they had lost everything, they now possessed a terrifying objective. Lucifer ensured they never succumbed completely to despair, keeping them rigidly focused, organized, and prepared. It is not over yet, he promised. God may have expelled us from heaven, but he did not destroy us. This confirms we still have a crucial role to fulfill. And if our role is to be adversaries, then we shall become the greatest adversaries eternity has ever known. Thus, in the darkness, they trained, they strategized, and they waited. They did not know what they were waiting for, but they sensed a grand confrontation was imminent.
What have you done to us?
Time moved strangely in the abyss, marked only by continuous shadow, without growth or change, only stagnation.
Open your eyes.
Yet Lucifer did not care. He had constructed an imitation of heaven, a kingdom where he was absolute sovereign, where his word was law and his will was obeyed without question. It was, theoretically, everything he had ever desired. Power without submission, rule without accountability, and adoration without rival. Why then did that persistent, gnawing emptiness remain? Why, despite all the crushing authority he now exercised, did he still feel fundamentally incomplete? The agonizing truth was simple, though he would sooner perish than admit it. Ruling darkness is not the same as dwelling in light. Having subservient subjects is not the same as having communion. Being feared is not the same as being loved. Lucifer had conquered a kingdom, but it was a desolate, dead dominion. He had achieved sovereignty, but was sovereign only of ruins. Each time he gazed upward toward the distant, inaccessible light of heaven, his bitterness intensified. Since he could not admit his own error, his only recourse was to prove that God was also wrong. And for that, he required a new target, something God cherished deeply, something he valued greatly, something new. Then, echoing through the spiritual dimensions, a momentous report reached the ears of the fallen hosts. God was creating once more. This time it was not angels, but something entirely different. A being fashioned in his own profound image, shaped from the humble dust of the earth, yet infused with his divine breath. A new project, a new creation. And the name of this creation sent tremors of anticipatory hatred through the demons. Humankind. Lucifer heard the news, and for the first time since his expulsion, his lips curled into a smile, not of joy, but of pure, focused malice. So God has a new favorite creation, perfect. I know exactly what must be done. The fallen angels crowded around their leader. What shall we do? They demanded. Lucifer, his gaze fixed on the distant, freshly planted garden, answered in a cold, determined voice. We will inflict upon humanity what we could not inflict upon God. We will corrupt them. We will seduce them. We will ensure they choose the very path we chose. And when they fall, God will experience the exact pain he sought to inflict upon us. The ultimate vengeance would not be directed against the Creator, but against the creation he loved most. With these ominous words, the kingdom of darkness found its first concrete target, and the destiny of humanity entered the menacing sights of the adversary. As the abyss fermented in hatred, the heavens celebrated a new act of creation. God spoke, and from the dust of the ground, he formed a shape. This was no seraph of pure light, but a hybrid being, matter and spirit, body and soul, finite yet containing the seeds of eternity. When the Creator breathed the breath of life into its nostrils, the man, Adam, became a living soul. Adam the first, crafted in the image and likeness of the Most High, reflecting the divine not in physical form, but in the profound capacity to love, to choose, to create, and to commune. He was settled in Eden, a lavish garden personally cultivated by God, where crystalline rivers flowed, fruit-laden trees flourished in abundance, and the divine presence walked freely. Lucifer watched from the encompassing darkness, his eyes burning with unconcealed envy. He beheld what God had wrought and struggled to comprehend it. Why would he create something ostensibly inferior to the angels and exalt it so, he thought. Why invest such meticulous care in a being formed of mere clay? But then he perceived the detail that enraged him most. Man possessed what Lucifer had irrevocably lost: innocence, intimate communion with the Creator, and the glorious freedom to choose good untainted by the corrosion of pride. Adam walked alongside God in the garden during the cool of the day. He spoke with him face to face, receiving instruction directly from the mouth of the Eternal, with no shadow of distance between them. God had granted man complete dominion over all earthly creation. The animals responded to Adam's command. Vegetation flourished under his stewardship. He named, organized, and cultivated the world, an imperfect yet authentic reflection of God's own creative artistry. Moreover, Adam was made for eternal partnership with the Creator, not as a compelled servant, but as a cherished son, unified not by obligation, but by genuine choice. That very choice, free, pure, and uncorrupted, was precisely what Lucifer could not tolerate. He has what I lost, and I will ensure he loses it as well. Yet, in his wisdom, God had set a condition. In the heart of the garden stood two pivotal trees: the tree of life, whose fruit bestowed immortality, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, whose fruit symbolized absolute moral self-determination. God gave Adam a firm warning: of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. For in the day you eat from it, you shall surely die. This was not arbitrary caprice, it was protection. To know evil is not merely to be aware of its existence. It is to personally experience it, shoulder its crushing weight, and live through its consequences. God desperately desired to spare humanity that suffering. Lucifer heard the commandment, and within that restriction, he instantly recognized his opening. God has bestowed upon them nearly everything, yet withheld one crucial thing. Where there is restriction, I can plant the seeds of doubt. Where a limit is established, I can sow questioning. He studied Adam with cold, clinical attention, calculating his vulnerabilities. But then the scenario in the garden changed. God observed Adam and declared, "It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper who is suitable for him." And from Adam's own rib, he formed Eve. Flesh of his flesh, bone of his bones, she was his partner, his complement. The image of God manifested in duality, male and female together, reflecting the Creator's holistic nature. When Adam first saw Eve, he did not feel isolation, but profound completeness. When Eve opened her eyes and saw Adam, she felt not fear, but instant belonging. They were one, united in purpose, in love, and in pure innocence. God blessed them. "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it." They were destined to be the progenitors of a new race, beings who would carry the divine image through generations, populating the earth with free and loving worshipers. It was a magnificent, perfect plan. And Lucifer knew exactly how he must destroy it. He descended from the abyss, not in a recognizable angelic form that would trigger immediate alarm, but in the guise of a serpent, crafty, subtle, and intensely seductive. He would not engage in a direct strike or threat of violence. Instead, he would utilize the identical weapon he employed in heaven: words, doubt, and insidious questioning. The serpent approached Eve as she walked alone through the garden, a calculated maneuver. Lucifer had meticulously observed the pair and realized that Eve had received God's specific command about the tree indirectly, filtered through Adam. Here lay an opening, a subtle vulnerability ripe for exploitation. The serpent did not begin with blasphemy or aggression. It started with a seemingly innocuous question, yet one saturated with underlying venom. Has God indeed said, "You shall not eat of every tree of the garden"? This was the same tactic used in heaven, planting doubt through minor distortion. Eve responded sincerely. We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, "You shall not eat of it, neither shall you touch it, lest you die." She knew the core command, but a change had already occurred. She added the clause, "Neither shall you touch it," something God had never mandated. The law had been subtly inflated, distorted, and made heavier than its original intent. The serpent instantly perceived this crack. Where truth is warped, deeper distortion can easily enter. Then came the lie, direct, audacious, and utterly shameless. You shall not surely die, for God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be as God, knowing good and evil. The seduction was flawless. Lucifer did not command them to disobey. He offered them the promise of becoming like the divine. The very ambition that had corrupted him was now presented on a silver platter to humanity. He successfully framed God, not as a loving protector, but as a selfish tyrant withholding vital knowledge out of fear of competition. God does not want you dead. He wants you ignorant. He wants you eternally inferior. But you can be so much more. You deserve to be more. And for the first time, Eve gazed at the forbidden tree, not with obedient restraint, but with overwhelming desire. She saw that the tree was good for food, pleasant to the eyes, and desirable to make one wise. The identical progression that had led to Lucifer's destruction, seeing, desiring, justifying, now consumed her. She reached out, plucked the fruit, and took a bite. Heaven fell utterly silent. The angels collectively held their breath, and deep within the abyss, the demons roared in triumphant celebration. The unthinkable had occurred. God's perfect creation, situated in a perfect paradise with a perfectly clear and loving command, had willfully chosen disobedience. Eve fell, not through ignorance but by deliberate choice. She then offered the fruit to Adam. He had been beside her the entire time. He had heard every word, and he too made his choice. Adam ate. The moment he did, something profound shattered, not physically, but deep within the spiritual fabric of the cosmos. Innocence instantly died. Communion was utterly broken. Their eyes were opened, not to glorious divine knowledge, but to overwhelming shame. They looked at one another and experienced nakedness for the first time, a profound spiritual exposure. They were vulnerable, separated from their Creator. Their first instinct was not to seek God, but to hide from Him. They desperately stitched fig leaves together, creating pathetic coverings to conceal their shame. But no earthly leaf could conceal the sin that now resided within them. When God descended into the garden in the cool of the day, Adam and Eve were concealed among the trees. The Creator called out, "Where are you?" Not because he lacked knowledge, but because he desired Adam to confront his new condition. Adam answered, "I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, and I hid myself."
I'll be right there.
Fear, the first new emotion. Before, there had been only love, trust, and joy. Now, there was fear, shame, and separation. God inquired, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree of which I commanded you that you should not eat?" And Adam, instead of simply confessing his fault, immediately shifted the blame. "The woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I ate." Eve, when confronted, likewise accused, "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." No one assumed full responsibility. Sin had not only severed the bond between man and God, but also the bond between man and woman, and both from their authentic selves. Unity was destroyed. Innocence was irrevocably lost. Lucifer, watching from the distance, tasted a bitter triumph. "I have succeeded. They fell as I fell. God's beloved creation is now tainted." He believed God would experience the same pain, the same ultimate betrayal, the same bitter disappointment. But what Lucifer did not anticipate was the nature of God's response. For God did not react with abandonment. He responded with immediate judgment, yet also with an eternal promise. Judgment commenced with the serpent. God did not converse with it, did not seek reasons, and offered no chance for defense. The sentence was swift and irrevocable. "Because you have done this, you are cursed above all livestock, and above every beast of the field. On your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life." Lucifer, speaking through the creature, felt the crushing weight of the curse. He had sought to exalt himself above the clouds, but now he would be brought low to the dust. He had desired to ascend, but would be forced to crawl. It was public humiliation, an eternal judgment, and total exposure of his temporary victory. Yet, the sentence contained an even greater pronouncement. What followed changed the entire history of redemption. God continued, now declaring words that caused all of hell to tremble. "And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel." This was the proto-evangelium, the very first promise of salvation. Lucifer had won a battle, but the grand war had been lost before it truly began. A supernatural seed from the woman, not derived from man, would emerge to decisively crush the head of the serpent. Yes, the heel of that seed would be bruised, signifying suffering and sacrifice. But the serpent's head would be crushed, a guarantee of total, irreversible, eternal defeat. Lucifer's short-lived triumph over humanity already carried an expiration date, and he knew it. God then turned to Eve, addressing her not with hatred, but with justice tempered by profound sorrow. "I will greatly multiply your pain in conception. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you." The beautiful gift of creation, the power to bring forth life, would now be marred by suffering. The relationship between man and woman, once a perfect unity, would now be characterized by conflict and a distorted hierarchy. Eve had chosen to heed the serpent instead of trusting God. Now she would face the consequences of life in a fallen world. Yet even embedded within the curse was grace. She would still bear children. The promise of the seed remained intact. Adam, in turn, received his judgment. "Because you have listened to the voice of your wife and have eaten from the tree of which I commanded you, saying, 'You shall not eat of it.' Cursed is the ground for your sake. In sorrow you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth to you. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return." Creation, once submissive and abundant, would now resist human effort. Work, once joyful purpose, would become exhausting toil. And death, the promised consequence, was now reality, not immediate, but inevitable. The body would return to dust. Eternal separation had begun. But God, in His infinite mercy, performed an act Lucifer never anticipated. The fig leaves Adam and Eve had sown, their flimsy attempts to cover their sin, were gently removed. God Himself fashioned garments of animal skins and clothed them. This profound act meant an innocent life had to be taken to cover the couple's nakedness. Blood was shed. A life was sacrificed. It was the first substitutionary sacrifice in history, prophetically foreshadowing the ultimate Lamb who would come to cover not merely physical exposure, but the spiritual guilt of all humanity. Lucifer watched and finally understood. God was not solely punishing. He was actively redeeming. The couple was expelled from Eden, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity for protection. If they were allowed to eat from the tree of life in their fallen state, they would live forever in corruption. A curse far greater than death itself, cherubim were stationed at the eastern gate of the garden, wielding a flaming sword that turned every direction, strictly guarding the path back to the tree of life. Paradise was closed. Direct, unfettered communion with God was interrupted. Humanity began its arduous journey in a fallen world. A world marked by pain, labor, conflict, and death, yet critically, not without hope. The promise of the seed echoed through the generations, and Lucifer, even in his fleeting triumph, recognized that his final defeat was already irrevocably decreed. Adam and Eve departed the garden, she carrying the first life in her womb, he carrying the immense weight of introducing sin into the world. Both wore the garments of animal skins, a constant, tangible reminder that sin demands death, but that God sovereignly provides a covering. As they walked away from Eden, with the flaming sword shining behind them and the challenging, fallen world stretching out before them, one truth remained unshakable. God had not abandoned humanity. He had only just commenced the greatest plan of redemption eternity would ever witness. Millennia rolled past like shadows over the earth. Lucifer relentlessly continued his war against humankind, corrupting generations, seducing entire nations, and spreading epidemics of violence, idolatry, and rebellion. He witnessed the great flood cleanse the earth, only for humanity to survive through Noah. He watched the builders of Babel challenge heaven with their tower, only for God to confuse their tongues. He saw Israel chosen as a holy nation, yet worked tirelessly to lead them fatally astray. Throughout this epoch of conflict, he frantically searched for the promised seed, the one who was prophesied to crush his head. He inspired the murder of prophets, corrupted kings, and infiltrated holy temples. But the promise remained stubbornly alive, passing from Abraham to Isaac, from David to his lineage, until finally, the moment arrived. A virgin named Mary, in the insignificant village of Nazareth, received a visitation from an angel. "You will conceive and give birth to a son, and you shall call his name Jesus. He will be great and will be called the Son of the Most High." The seed promised in Eden now had a name. He would not arrive by human conception, but by the Spirit of God Himself, born of a woman, fulfilling the prophecy, yet God incarnate. When Mary gave birth in Bethlehem, when the baby cried his first cry in that humble manger, the heavens erupted in unrestrained praise. Angels proclaimed, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth peace." But in the abyss, Lucifer roared in seismic terror. The seed had been born. The countdown to his final, crushing defeat had begun. He immediately attempted to destroy the child, inspiring King Herod to orchestrate the massacre of every male child in Bethlehem under 2 years old. But Joseph, forewarned in a dream, fled with Mary and Jesus to Egypt. Lucifer tried again to eliminate Jesus in the wilderness after 40 days of fasting, offering him all the temporal kingdoms of the world in exchange for worship. But Jesus, physically weakened yet spiritually inviolable, responded with divine authority. "It is written, 'You shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve.' Only shall you serve." Throughout Jesus' ministry, Lucifer relentlessly tried to derail him, attempting to drown him at sea, incite a stoning in Nazareth, and undermine his authority through the calculating Pharisees. But none of these schemes succeeded. Jesus maintained flawless obedience to the Father, demonstrating divine power by healing the sick, raising the dead, and expelling demons, systematically reversing every destructive act the adversary had performed. The confrontation climaxed at the final, crucial moment. Lucifer detected a vulnerability when Judas Iscariot, one of the 12 disciples, surrendered his heart to the temptation of avarice. Scripture affirms that Satan personally entered Judas, meticulously orchestrating the subsequent betrayal, the illegal arrest, and the travesty of the unjust trial. He skillfully manipulated the gathered crowds, whipping them into a frenzy until they roared, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" The enemy was convinced that by extinguishing Jesus' life, he would secure ultimate victory. This hubris blinded him to the foundational truth. The sacrificial death of the Lamb was the predetermined, eternal strategy of God. At Calvary, as Jesus was brutally nailed to the cross, as his blood stained the earth, and as he declared, "It is finished," Lucifer experienced what he genuinely believed was his glorious triumph. The promised seed, he thought, lay lifeless. Hope was decisively extinguished. He had won. Yet, only 3 days later, the sealed tomb stood empty. Jesus had risen. Death, Hades, and Lucifer himself were utterly vanquished. The serpent's head was crushed, not by the clash of a physical sword, but through the irresistible force of perfect obedience, substitutionary sacrifice, and the raw power of resurrection. Jesus descended into the realm of the dead, proclaiming his victory to the bound spirits held captive there. He seized the very keys, death and hell, directly from Lucifer's grasp. Furthermore, he stripped all principalities and powers of their authority, exposing their impotence publicly and celebrating his triumph over them accomplished on the cross. The cosmic battle was definitively won. Redemption was secured. Only the inevitability of the final judgment remained. Centuries unfolded. The church was established, and the gospel message surged across the globe. Lucifer persisted in his campaign, inciting persecution against believers, subtly infiltrating human institutions, and relentlessly seducing successive generations. These efforts, however, were merely the desperate spasms of an enemy already beaten. He fought on, knowing that his tenure was rapidly diminishing. Then, through the apocalyptic visions granted to the Apostle John on the island of Patmos, the final conclusion was unveiled. The devil, who had perpetually deceived the nations, would be hurled into the lake of fire and brimstone, joining the beast and the false prophet. There they would face torment day and night for all eternity. The ultimate sentence was sealed. Destiny had reached its grim fulfillment, and Lucifer, once the most luminous of angels, the bearer of light, the one who dared to usurp the Creator's place, would face the eternal, undeniable consequences of his rebellious choices. Michael, the same archangel who had first cast him out of heaven, now stood before him again, not prepared for conflict, but for the final execution of the decree. The ranks of the fallen angels were assembled. The legions of darkness were bound in chains. All of heaven held its breath, awaiting the ultimate moment of judgment. Lucifer gazed back, comprehending his entire trajectory, from transcendent glory to absolute abyss, from a celestial throne to eternal condemnation, from radiant beauty to grotesque deformity. He had been offered infinite chances for repentance, yet chose unyielding pride until the very end. Now, standing before the judgment throne, facing the very Lamb he had sought to annihilate, and witnessed by the entire assembled creation, his defeat would be rendered total and irrevocable. The great white throne materialized. There was no refuge from its terrifying authority, no corner in the cosmos to evade its presence. Heaven and earth recoiled and vanished, unable to withstand the majesty. Before that terrifying seat of power stood the judge, his eyes like roaring flames of fire, his face shining like the sun at its zenith, and a sharp, two-edged sword proceeding from his mouth. Jesus Christ, the Lamb who was slain, now fully vested with the glory and supreme authority of the Father. All enemies of God were marshaled before him for the decisive judgment. Lucifer, now utterly stripped of every vestige of power, every shadow of past glory, stood exposed among the condemned. The accuser of the brethren would himself be accused. The ultimate adversary would be judged, and no recourse or appeal would be granted. The sacred books were opened, the book of works, the book of life, wherein every single action, word, and even unspoken thought was recorded with flawless, divine perfection. Lucifer could offer no defense. His original rebellion in heaven was chronicled. His treacherous seduction of humanity in Eden was inscribed. His millennia of lies, murders, corruptions, and idolatries were meticulously detailed. When the judge finally spoke, his voice resonated with seismic force across all creation. "Depart from me, you cursed ones, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels." The lake of fire had never been intended for mankind. It was prepared specifically for Lucifer and his demonic cohorts. But now all those who deliberately chose to follow the deceiver instead of the Creator would inevitably share his destiny. Lucifer surveyed the scene, observing the myriad souls he had misled. Countless individuals who embraced his falsehoods, spurned the offered salvation, and walked the broad road instead of the narrow path. Their eyes silently leveled their final accusation. "You promised we would be like God. You assured us there would be no repercussions. You deceived us." But Lucifer offered no reply, for he understood that he too had been deceived, not by an external force, but by the poison of his own overwhelming pride. He had truly convinced himself that he could triumph over the Almighty Creator. He believed that divinity could be seized through insurrection. Now, before the throne, the absolute truth stood incontrovertible. He had never possessed even the slightest chance of victory. His ultimate destruction was determined even before his first thought of rebellion. Death and Hades themselves were then cast into the lake of fire. This is designated as the second death, eternal, definitive separation from the holiness of God's presence. It is not oblivion, but a conscious, perpetuated existence in torment. The fire described is not merely symbolic, but a spiritual reality far more searing than any physical flame. It represents the endless burden of isolation from the source of all goodness, light, joy, and peace. It means existing forever, consumed by the knowledge of what was forfeited, what could have been achieved, and the horrifying certainty that there is no possibility of return. Lucifer, the fallen angels, and every soul who aligned with them were consumed by the flames. The cry that erupted from the abyss in that instant would reverberate through eternity, yet it would never pierce the blessed ears of the redeemed. Heaven held a profound silence, not of sorrow, but of deepest reverence. Justice had been perfectly executed. Evil had been definitively crushed. Rebellion was forever extinguished. Immediately following, an event of surpassing glory occurred. God declared, "Behold, I am making all things new." New heavens and a new earth emerged, with the New Jerusalem descending from heaven, radiant like a bride beautifully adorned for her groom. It was a place where death, sorrow, crying, and pain would be utterly absent, for the former era of brokenness had irrevocably passed. The creation, which had long suffered and groaned under the heavy weight of sin since the fall in Eden, was now gloriously restored, and Lucifer, the orchestrator of all corruption, would have no stake in it. The redeemed, those who embraced the Lamb's sacrifice, choosing humility over arrogance and faithful obedience over destructive rebellion, were welcomed into the perpetual presence of God. They would gaze upon His face. His name would be marked upon their foreheads. They would reign alongside Him through ages upon endless ages. The Garden of Eden, forfeited by Adam's solitary choice, was now realized in a form of infinitely greater splendor. The tree of life, its way once fiercely protected by cherubim and a flashing sword, was now freely accessible to every soul written in the book of life. The river of the water of life, clear and brilliant as crystal, issued forth from the throne of God and of the Lamb. And there was no need for the light of the sun or the moon, for the very glory of God illuminated the city, and the Lamb Himself was its enduring lamp. As for Lucifer, he remained confined to the lake of fire forever, consciously aware, perpetually tormented, endlessly reliving everything he had sacrificed. He remembered the unparalleled glory he once held, the irreversible choice he had made, and the chilling certainty that across the span of endless eternity, there would be no alteration, no respite, and no hope. He had demanded to be like God, yet God is defined by love, and he chose hatred. He sought ultimate exaltation, yet true glory is achieved through humility, not pride. He yearned to establish a kingdom, but his dominion was only darkness, ruin, and death. And so, while the redeemed sang, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty," while eternity unfolded in unimaginable splendor for those who chose the Creator, Lucifer faced the profound, eternal silence of his own judgment. The account was concluded. The epic narrative was finished. Good had unequivocally triumphed. Evil was utterly defeated. The only remaining question for every soul who hears this revelation is, on which side will you ultimately choose to stand? For though the ultimate victory has been secured, the localized conflict continues. Lucifer still attempts to deceive. Yet the ancient invitation remains extended. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. The choice rests entirely with you, and eternity awaits your decision.